Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Marion, for this introduction. My name is Lucia Oms, and I'm the founder and director of Talking Galleries. I'm delighted to be here at Armory Live with all of you. In first place, I want to thank very much to Nicole Berry, Executive Director of the Armory Show, and all her team, Adriana Frietta, Deputy Director, and Thomas David Levis, Director of Programming, for inviting us to take part this year of their public programming and prepare 2 talks of this series. To introduce you briefly to our project, Talking Galleries was born in 2011 in Barcelona as the first international think tank for gallerists, an open platform dedicated to generating debate and knowledge in the field of gallery practices and the art market. The project has evolved and enlarged its vision to become a space to debate contemporary culture and art practices. The project is structured around the yearly symposium. We have had 8 editions in Barcelona, held at the MACBA, Barcelona's Contemporary Art Museum, and we are currently in full swing for the 9th edition to take place in early October. In addition, we have organized special programs around the globe, including art world capitals such as London, Paris, Berlin, Seoul, Madrid, or Sao Paulo. And New York, this past April, as probably many of you have heard about, we were co-host to the conference at the Morgan Library in partnership with Alan Schwarzman advisory team. Now, we are delighted to be back in New York City and be part of the conversation proposed by the Armory Show. We have co-organized today's talk entitled Art in the Age of Metaverse, and tomorrow we will host the panel Tech and Tradition, Watershed Moment in Collecting. Both talks will revolve around the crosswords of art and technology, with the aim to examine how the art market is behaving today in an era shaped by technology and unpredictable economy. We are proud to count with the precious contribution of the distinctive group of art professionals. My special thanks for the invited speakers and moderators for joining us in this occasion. And now, let's start with today's conversation. Let me introduce the first panel that will focus on how the new digital assets are changing the landscape for artists, businesses, and collectors. I find this is a key topic to be addressed at a time when the art world is immersed in a paradigm shift due to the emergence of blockchain technology and, in particular, the phenomenon of NFTs and the Metaverse. It will be moderated by Andrew Goldstein. Andrew is the current editor-in-chief of Art News and also hosts the Art Angle podcast produced by Art News. Andrew, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucia. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining us here today on what is shaping up to be a beautiful late summer Saturday, maybe one of the last. But the topic that we are here to talk about is, as Lucia mentioned, art in the age of the metaverse. And I think at this point, that doesn't really need that much of a preamble, because I think we all know the rough contours of what the metaverse is. And frankly, anything beyond that is pretty speculative and is still in the process of being formed. Hi, Gaia. That's my daughter in the back. But one thing we do know for certain is that after 2 years of explosive growth during the pandemic, the crypto world is encountering some pretty significant speed bumps right now, with valuations plummeting, with some previously high-flying companies going out of business. We also know that there are some incredibly intelligent people who truly believe in the potentialities of the metaverse and crypto art, and who are working hard during this difficult period to build out the vision of the future that they believe can be a reality. So 3 of these very smart people are on the stage over here to my left today, and there's a lot to talk about. So I think that maybe to dive in, we can just do a quick round robin of sorts, where everybody tells the audience how they first encountered, crypto art / the metaverse. And in order to kind of break the pool table, I think, Pablo, your story might be interesting, because you really had an interesting angle into this. And you got your MBA in Columbia, you entered the finance sector, and then you became introduced to the metaverse pretty early on, I think around 2017.
Correct.
So what was it that really engaged you about it, and how did you become involved?
All right, I'll try to be brief in a little bit of the background, but the reality is that my professional career took me through the blockchain space, and I was able to find the concept of the metaverse very early on when it was only an idea before Decentraland even was public. I was able to participate and engage with the ecosystem, and I had a deep understanding of the technology, and I found that it's just a matter of time before people realized that it was a very valid way of actually owning digital assets. Fast forward a few months or a couple of years later, and my professional career was merged together with my passion from the arts. I was lucky enough that I was brought up in a family that was always around culture in general, architecture and art in particular. And while we were we were always just embedded in that ecosystem. I was able to find what was happening in the art world utilizing this technology, and I saw that the explosion of talent and innovation that was happening there. And it was a very, very organic undertaking. My wife and I were very passionate about what was happening, and we started getting very close to all of the artists that were starting to participate in this ecosystem and moving forward. Our journey was beautiful because while we never got into the creative aspect of what the artists were doing, we were really alongside them and helping them with everything outside the creative nature. And we were seeing how this was developing. So it was just a beautiful, beautiful moment, very organic, and since inception, really, since the beginning of crypto art history.
And I think one trend that we're going to see as this conversation continues is that the emergence of crypto art has really been two sides of the same coin, with the creative side and also the market side really being critical parts of increasing the exposure and the excitement around this. And you made waves in 2020 after you bought one work by Beeple, and within a couple of months, I think you bought it for $65,000, and then within a couple of months, you sold it for $6.5 million, which is a fairly good return on the investment. So I wonder, what did you learn from that experience with this encounter with the market? And I mean, have you sold a lot of works, or was that a kind of a rarity?
Well, a lot of things have been learned. Everything really happened so fast. But the reality is that, funnily enough, I don't look at the collection. The idea is my wife and I don't look at the collection as a monetary project. It is a passion project. It's a legacy project. It's a patronage project for us. The reality is that I have sold less than a handful of works in my collection, and we have quite the extensive collection. And it's always for something a lot more than just the monetary aspect. Of course, we're not going to lie. Everybody likes creating value, and everybody likes making money. But the reality is that if there's not another reason to set a new standard, to help an artist reach another level, to put something new in the market, to get some recognition, it is very unlikely that we will ever sell works. It's always in conversation with the artist as well, and always in contact with them, which is something that I find very, very, very different to the traditional ecosystem in that way.
And I just one last question before moving on is that you were also a patron early on by co-founding the Museum of Crypto Art, which is really, a kind of the flip side of the market participation. And what was the original vision behind that, and how has your vision evolved kind of since?
Again, when we started being active in the space, it was really a different ecosystem. It was well before all the interest and intention. So we were seeing, again, we had a little bit more experience on market-related activities, and we were seeing that all of these artists and creators were bringing such a beautiful and engaging new form of expression, but they were making some mistakes along the way that were not really allowing them to really continue their career in the way that they wanted. So we really started supporting and, again, bringing together other collectors, putting these works in the metaverse, putting these works in the digital realm, and just making sure that this ecosystem was continuing to evolve through time. That was a little bit of the vision. It was, again, a passion project, and yeah, it was a beautiful journey while it lasted.
And so, Caroline, I want to move on to you because your journey down the rabbit hole, I believe, began with a fateful CryptoPunk.
Yes, it did.
Can you talk about what happened?
Sure. So my background is contemporary art. I started my career as trying to be an artist, and then wasn't that good, and became rather a curator for a bank, and then started working for myself in 2013, working for private clients. In 2015, I became a contemporary art appraiser, running also an appraisal business. About a year ago, a CryptoPunk was donated to a museum, and I was facilitating this. And the museum could not receive it because they needed insurance on it, which at the time was it's still a bit of the Wild West, but then much more so. So I kind of just went on this wild quest to figure it out. I needed a solution for this one punk, and I never dreamed it would turn into, my occupation at this point. But so I just started calling everyone in the space that had anything to do with NFT insurance, custodians, insurance companies. I eventually was introduced to someone who was the head of insurance at a very large brokerage. He introduced me to a company that was a bullion vaulting company who had come up with a way. They'd hired a crypto expert to figure out deep cold storage to hold NFTs in maximum security, basically. And so all that was left was a valuation piece. So I wrote one at that point. I wrote a paper on how to value an NFT. I submitted it to Lloyd's of London. We went back and forth for 3 months, and they approved it. And then it was quite a manual process that also included a system I had built that could reprice NFTs every day. So looking towards the volatility of the blockchain and the underlying currency. Since then, it's grown into quite a robust system that can now scale up to large collections and institutional clients.
And how many other appraisers are there in the world who are able to help a collector appraise an artwork for insurance purposes?
As far as I know, it's just me, but there are other platforms out there that do pricing, but pricing and appraising are very different things. With appraising, you are, writing evaluation for a specific purpose with named users, and I'm USPAP compliant. I'm also co-chair of the NFT committee at the Appraisers Association of America. And we're very, very closely tracking, regulations and what's happening with the IRS. We talk to the IRS. So as far as I know, it's just me, but I'm up for debate if anyone knows anyone else.
And Jeanne, you spent a long time in the tech sector, and then you went to Saatchi Art, where you were involved in selling a lot of different kinds of artworks, but some digital artworks. And I believe it was during this time you realized that there were a number of obstacles for making a real market around digital art. Could you explain what those obstacles were and how the blockchain kind of changed the landscape?
Yes. As you said, I had been working in tech for quite a long time. Came up in product management and worked at several websites and software companies, and had familiarity with code and how to create and imagine new product experiences. One of my best opportunities in my career was to take on the role of general manager at Saatchi Art, where I fell in love with not just the tech side, but the artist side, and working with artists and helping them realize their vision of creating a great future for themselves, selling their art directly online. Within that experience, we did have digital artists, and those artists were creating incredibly great works. But because this was pre-2017, 2018, we really struggled with how to help them sell. The hurdles that we faced were really clear. One, people didn't understand how to value digital art. Two, they didn't understand what the future would look like for holding that art and whether they could resell it. And three, they didn't know how to display it. And as I started to understand those challenges and tried to figure out how to navigate my way through that on behalf of the artists in order to help them sell, I started to learn about crypto art. And this was about the same time, 2018 or so. And in learning about crypto art and how art would be attributed to a token that would also live on the blockchain, it all started to fall together. I knew that we were going to be able to solve the problem of understanding value. And apparently now we can solve the problem of appraising it. We would also know how to solve the problem of resale and understanding the long-term value and whether or not you could feel confident and good about your purchase for the long view. But I knew that we also were not going to easily be able to solve the display problem, because most of the crypto art that was purchased at the time was just shared online. You would view it on a desktop, or God forbid, you would just hold up your phone and show somebody what you had in your collection. So that's why I started Danvas. It all came from that, the desire to help artists have their work be appreciated and valued and seen at the level that I think it should be, which is at a large scale, beautiful display, something that looks just as good as everything else here at the Armory. But underneath that was really the problem that you just described.
And so, I mean, for a long time, Bill Gates famously built a house that was filled with these digital art display
Yes.
solutions. And you've got, Samsung, LG, a number of different, companies are trying to position themselves in this space as a way to showcase art. What is it that was lacking, and how does Danvas kind of, what sets Danvas apart?
So I think what was happening at the time was people were just trying to come up with any solution they could for hanging digital art that they were passionate about. And largely that meant that you would take a TV and you would try very hard to figure out how to get that TV to house your file, and you would have to mount it in a way that worked as best as it could for the aspect ratio of the TV. But that's really just frankly a hack or a sort of in-between solution, because there wasn't really a more optimal solution out there. So Danvas is built from the ground up for digital art. We envisioned it in a very, very different way. So for us, we thought about the aspect ratio of the most popular digital art. We thought about the kind of color arrays that we wanted to offer digital artists. If you're a digital artist and you're working on a fantastic computer at home, you have a wide array of color to select from. You have incredible blacks, you have brighter whites, but none of that renders in a TV. And that just doesn't seem like an adequate way for an artist to have their art expressed. And our solution changes that. We also have something that's very important in the NFT world, which is we have proof of authenticity. And I think this relates a little bit to the kind of experiences you guys have talked about. What sets NFTs apart is the ability for that blockchain connection to your wallet to prove that you in fact own the artwork. And that has been missing in displays as well. So our display has a small blue light that illuminates to let people know that that artwork that's up on the display is connected to your wallet and that you in fact own it. And that sort of does two things. One, from an NFT culture perspective, it allows you, frankly, to just flex a little, right? Who doesn't love to make sure that everyone knows they have a beautiful piece of art? I have a feeling there's a few in your collection you're very proud to show. But secondarily, and I think we don't talk about this enough, it reflects that the purchase of the artwork has been ethically purchased. One of the beauties of the NFT world is that for the first time in the history of art, artists are getting a royalty on subsequent resales of their artwork, and that's transformational and needs to be represented. So when you put your art up on the wall and you have the blue light illuminate, yes, you get to flex that you apparently have one of the most greatest packs, but you also get to let everyone know that this is in fact something that's been ethically purchased, that the artist was actually paid out, and you can be proud of that. I could go on and on about my display. I won't hog the entire time, but I think those are pretty relevant for the kind of environment that we're in.
If you don't mind, I want to comment, because my wife and I have gone through great lengths to show their collection at home. And the reality is that we have had, as you say, the process is very cumbersome. It's downloading the files, putting them in something, uploading them, and it's just very tedious every time you want to either change. It's just not connected. So I think that, facilitating and having that direct connection is extraordinarily important. And I certainly welcome it. So,
I'm glad. I'll see you at the booth after.
Of course, of course.
So one thing I think that unites everything that all three of you are doing is that you're building the blocks of the infrastructure of a future metaverse crypto art world that can have lasting growth potential and real sustainability. And so, Caroline, how does what you're doing through Appraisal Bureau and through your NFT valuations, how does that kind of build for a sustainable future for this market?
Sure. So when I first got into this, what just screamed at me from the beginning was exposure. Just seeing numbers go up, and these are assets now. This is personal property. Use PAP language. It's personal property. IRS considers it that, and it needs to be managed just like other kinds of assets. Like physical art has insurance, so we need it on digital assets as well. And valuation is a building block. It's a vital element of all of that. So once we have that, then we can build on other things, also in terms of dealing with tax, asset management, many other things. It's kind of applicable a lot of ways.
And what are some things you can't do with an NFT if it's not insured?
You can't do if it's not insured?
Yeah.
Well, if it's not insured, you've got risk for one. So, a hot wallet will present a lot of risks. There's utility is a great, part of a lot of collections. However, there are, there's fake airdrops, there's Trojan horses, and those can jump into your wallet and wipe it out if it's, and then it's lost. So, and we've heard plenty of those stories of that happening. So.
If I may add, outside of insurance, you can get financing if you have appraisal, which is something that's completely lacking from this ecosystem, and it's very, very present in the traditional art world. So it's going to be financing if you want to get any debt from the works. If you don't have the proper appraisal, you can do it in the digital ecosystem without using the centralized tools that are not ideal for different reasons.
And going outside of directly NFTs a little bit, there are other applications of this that once you can ground that value and you can shift the risk of it to Lloyd's or to an insurance market, like you said, it opens up a lot of financial tools. You can, like in other markets that exist already. So. And
you also mentioned that for museum shows, you often need insurance. So I think that's a key part. So, what kind of clients do you have?
Across the map. Private collectors, institutions, it's building every day. So auditors also, that's been a big market.
We all know this is a period of extremely high volatility in the marketplace, and we're gonna get into that a little bit more. So how do you appraise NFTs in this period of extreme price swings and where, from one day to the other, there could be a massive shift?
Sure. So part of my system is it's to track the volatility. We reprice everything every day. And what Lloyd's required was every 30 days I submit a report so that they can look at the volatility. And we look at it closer to like commodities, really. And then if there's a shift above a certain amount, then we look at the premium and that gets adjusted accordingly. And that's because, the insurance market on NFTs is brand new. So it really can't take any hits at this point. Whereas, fine art has a very, very deep market that can absorb payouts, whereas it hasn't happened yet in NFTs. So we have to keep it as tight as possible.
So Pablo, you've been doing very interesting work with crypto artists through the RIC collection, which it was previously called the 555 collection, I believe, and also your startup platform Aorist. So can you start by explaining how you work with artists through the RIC collection? Because it doesn't act like the Rubel collection, for instance. It acts in a slightly different and more hybridized way. So how do you do that?
So, okay, I think it's two completely different projects. One of them, it's, the personal project, the RF.C collection, the personal project that I have with my wife. And to be honest, all the activities that we do there, it's just for passion. It's just because we enjoy it. We just want to see artists, develop their careers and continue their paths. And whatever we can do to support, we'll surely be around. What is interesting is that through our activities in the collection, through our collective, we found that there were a few problems with the ecosystem that were really not allowing this to continue how we wanted. And this is why we really created Aorist, which is a much more professional, sophisticated approach of pushing the ecosystem forward. It's actually a business, but with that we actually do bring together what we think is the best of both worlds. Without being very, very brief, because I don't want to get too deep into that, but there's three main problems that are not allowing the ecosystem to move how we want it. The first one is the user experience, where if you're not a blockchain PhD, you simply don't even know how to look. It's too expensive, it's too slow, it's ever changing, it's just too complicated, and in my opinion, it's a huge barrier to entry for a lot of people that want to find digital art fascinating, but can't really participate in the space. The second problem that we have is we have a big lack of quality and curation control, and this is because of a few issues that have happened. In particular because of how the marketplaces are set up, where it's more a technology play, where they allow artists to put works in the blockchain, but they don't offer any of the support that is necessary for a successful career. In addition, I'm a huge fan of royalties, but I think that royalties need to have a slight adjustment to actually make a more mature ecosystem moving forward. And the third problem is the environmental concerns that, in my opinion, are not attributable to either the creators nor the collectors, because their activity doesn't really affect the output of Ethereum. Again, I don't want to get too close. The reality, however, is that after the merge and with some other alternatives that we have in other blockchains, this is not a real issue moving forward, and we have alternatives to do it. So what we did is we brought together, instead of going deep into the decentralized ethos, into the blockchain mentality, what we tried to do is we got the best experience and know-how from the traditional world. We partner up with some of the most, again, knowledgeable and influential people from the traditional world. We brought together a highly sophisticated, very advanced marketplace where you can mint and distribute in a very, very seamless manner, so that all the concentration is in the art. And then what we did is we married that knowledge from the traditional art world with the innovation from the digital art world to create something that is very exciting. So with that, we have a completely different model. It's not that we put works in the blockchain. We actually partner up with artists to develop the next stage in their career and the next projects in their career. We really support them in everything that related to the project, both in production, in communications, in getting them collectors, in giving them the marketplace, in absolutely everything. And we try to bring digitally native artists to physical locations around the world that are important art events around the world. The reason why we do this is that because I'm so engaged with everything going digital. This is what I spent my whole career doing. I'm a huge ambassador of decentralization and on digitalism. But the reality is that the same way that as we move forward, we are going to do more and more things on the digital, we still live here. We still like to touch things. We're used to experiencing art, how we are here. This is amazing. This is fascinating. And I think that merits that connection, that making people realize that this is something that you can consume and experience in the same way that you could do in a digital fashion, in an analog fashion, is the key to going mainstream.
I mean, one thing that I think is so interesting about what you do is that not only do you provide a platform, a marketplace, and an exposure for artists, but you also give them a number of services that in the traditional world you mainly expect to get from a big blue chip gallery like a Davis Warner, where you help with the accounting, you help with PR, you help with museum shows. And which arm is it that is involved with this kind of services layer? Is it Aorist or? That's
Aorist, yeah. Everything right now, again, all the professional approach to the space is done through Aorist. We have a full team, a very engaged path of how we like to work with artists and how we want to take the ecosystem forward. So that is done through Aorist. Through the collection, again, it's just on a personal level, engaging. I really personally really enjoy talking to the artists, supporting the artists, getting close to them, and yeah, so completely different projects. With that, just one small mention with Aorist, for example, we I don't know if people remember the Retica Nadol show that was happening in Miami Beach, in Art Basel, Miami Beach last year, or what happened in the Venice Biennale with Studio Drift, Rafael Rosenthal and Jonas Luke. And now a small alpha here for the group. We are presenting in December what is for me the most exciting and sophisticated art project that I've worked with in my life, that I think is going to redefine physical, digital, immersive art. I cannot give too many things, but it's going to be by Random International. It's going to be presented in Miami during Miami Art Week. So if you're there, make sure to come check it out. I'm sure you won't disappoint.
Very exciting. I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, Random International is the group behind The Rain Room, which was a massive international hit. So who knows what weather phenomenon we will encounter in Miami. So let's pull back a little bit, and this is a complicated question, so forgive me for reading this one. But let's pull back a little bit and look at the crypto art landscape at the moment. So Bitcoin and Ethereum are both down more than 50% since the start of the year. The trading on the platform OpenSea is down a reported 99% over the course of this year. The floor prices for the most famous NFT series have been plummeting. So let's go around and ask a fairly straightforward question. Crypto winter. Is it real? Why does it matter? And what's going to happen after it?
It is real. It's been expected. So one thing I sort of assure people of when I talk about crypto winter is, I believe, at least in the communities of NFT creators that I have worked with, if you had asked them in 2021 what was ahead, they would have all said crypto winter. Everyone understood that we were on an excitement trajectory. We were on a thrust towards innovation, and we were in a space where, at least, in the parlance of NFT folks, it was the rocket ship days, right? But that didn't mean that there were blinders to the fact that there would need to be market corrections. And that's really what we're experiencing right now, is that we're seeing a retraction, we're seeing a correction, and we're seeing a pause and a reflection on how things were valued, how people felt about their pacing on purchases, and I think honestly, the rubric for what people felt they needed to evaluate art against, the way that they wanted to think about their purchases has changed. All of that to me is healthy, right? Rocket ship days are fantastic, but they don't last forever. You have corrections, especially in innovation. People find a new way to think about things, take a breath, and then often a new wave of innovation comes right before that. And I feel like there's already in the art community, or in the digital art and NFT community, a lot of excitement about what that next wave is going to bring. We have obviously the changes to Ethereum coming up. We have a lot, I think, of great conversation about Tezos and what its value is. And I think there's a movement towards a new resurgence. So from my perspective, and maybe that's because I've always worked in tech, which is always filled with innovation surges and retractions, this is just what it feels like.
And so you've been working on Danvas for a long time now.
Yep.
And you're debuting it right now.
Yes.
During the fair. So obviously not during the rocket ship days, but during this this period. How did the market shift impact your own business plans for Danvas?
It didn't. We knew there would be a winter.
Oh.
So we knew that we needed to be careful about it. I think for those of us that are in technology right now, we're all thinking carefully about how we control our spend and how we pace product releases and how we think about serving our communities in a responsible fiscal way. But that doesn't mean you stop innovating, and it doesn't mean you stop pushing. You just are extremely measured in what choices you make, I think.
So saner.
Perhaps, I don't know. It's insane to be an innovator sometimes. So I think perhaps maybe an innovator who thinks a little bit more about the entire field.
And Caroline, same question to you. Crypto winter, how have you been seeing it play out in your appraisals?
Well, valuations are down, obviously. We all know that. But I agree that it's actually healthy, and the market was in a place of so much hype and pump, and we're now at a more organic level that's sustainable. And what we're seeing is utility coming out of NFTs, and really now talking about what the technology is really about, which I'm really excited about, because an NFT itself is not just art. It's so broad. It's as broad as a web page. It can be so many things. It will hit every industry. And so right now is a moment for building when the markets are down. And I'm really excited for the future of what we'll see. I mean, in my case, I'm about to start delivering appraisals as NFTs, appraisal tokens, which are not currency. I've already checked all the regulation. So I think it's a very exciting moment.
And
Pablo, you're trained as an economist.
Yeah. So I actually have a slightly different view to what I've heard. From what I've heard here, I think it's fantastic what is happening here. It's not only welcome, but it's very, very good for the majority of the ecosystem. But we have to realize that NFTs is too broad of a word. It's kind of like saying assets in the traditional world. It's very important to separate what are collectibles, what is digital land, what is gaming, what is many other applications, and what is art within this. There has been certainly a crypto winter. What I would say is that the high end of the digital art market has not been affected nearly as much. Refik Anadol just had his record sale less than 2 months ago. We just had in Aorist record sales as well into the month of July with both Quayola and Andrés Reisinger, both in prices and in volume. And in general, there's a huge interest from many people when it comes to direct digital art. What happened in this ecosystem is that it attracted a lot of interest. And I mean this with no disrespect. This just happens in every market across the world, in the early market, but some uneducated interest in the space that perhaps did not know how to value certain things. The reality is that it was a lot of crypto traders, too many crypto traders treating these as financial assets rather than as art. The reality is that this balance is now changing a little bit. We're seeing some more sophistication. We're seeing some groups actually focusing more on the art. And I think it's fantastic. I extraordinarily welcome it. And I think it's really bringing a lot of maturity to the space. So it's fantastic.
I think that it's very interesting what you were saying about how, I mean, NFT is not a very useful term anymore. it's almost a hurdle, because it's something that is the shorthand for talking about anything from digital art to top shot videos to basically like classical digital art that has been put on the blockchain. I mean, so there's a lot of it's too fungible. It's too fungible a term. But I think it's interesting what you're saying about the cryptocurrency traders, because for a long time, one obvious problem with the NFT market has been that it's been very pegged to cryptocurrency itself. There's been a lot of traders who have been using it as this wonderful marketing opportunity for giving people a use case for how to use NFTs. And I think that I forget which of the brainiacs in the crypto sphere who said that, but they were surprised that art was the thing that really took off. They were, Top Shot seemed like it was a viable thing, but then art really captured the attention of the world. So my question is, will the valuations of NFTs, crypto art, remain pegged to cryptocurrency valuations, or is there going to be a potential decoupling of these things? And
start. There is, of course, they ride the cryptocurrencies, they sit on the blockchains, but there is a spread above that. It's not directly pegged. There has to be some correlation, just like there would any currency. If you buy something in yen and yen goes down, it's it's just is what it is. But there, in my original paper argued for the fact that there is a spread in that difference, that these NFTs do have other value besides just what the cryptocurrencies show.
And can you explain that spread? What are the?
It's proprietary.
Oh, but I think roughly. I mean, because I remember when we were speaking, you were saying that certain kinds of NFTs hold their value to a greater degree than other kinds.
Sure. So, I mean, there's so, like we were saying, there's so many kinds, but if you were to look, for instance, at a collection where you have 10,000 NFTs in that collection, that's an ecosystem. So you have built-in support that if, one CryptoPunk, one ape doesn't sell for a certain amount, you have so many other sales happening every day. So those, I think, have more security in them because you have a support system. So
I think that personally, if we continue to see a big peg between digital art and the crypto market as a whole, we're in big trouble. The reality is that for me, in this case, blockchain is just a tool. As it relates to art, it's not the case for other NFTs and for other applications, but as it relates to art, it's just a tool for a better certification, ownership, provenance ownership, more interoperability, more efficiency, royalty components, and many things that you can apply. But if we really have a correlation, it means that we're having a very bad maturity and a very bad path in the market. So I really expect it to completely decouple. And one of the most important things and reasons of why we are here so affected by the crypto market as a whole is because of the mistake of pricing things in Ethereum. Ethereum is a fantastic innovation. I'm a huge fan of Ethereum, of everything. It's just not a currency. It was never intended to be a currency. And it's just too volatile for absolutely pricing any mature market. So the number one thing that I would do in crypto art is pricing things in US dollars or any equivalent money around the world, but have the ability to pay with whatever you. But I believe that Ether pricing is a huge mistake at the moment.
And on Aorist, you can pay with dollars.
100%. Everything's paid with dollars. You can pay with wire, credit card, debit card, ACH, and crypto on multiple chains. We just make it super easy for you, but it's point and click, easier than Amazon.
So I think that's a fascinating topic, is the intrinsic value of NFTs. And obviously, again, it's not totally fungible. There are different NFTs that have different kinds of quality. You've got the PFPs, you've got the one-on-ones, you've got within these different genres a tremendous amount of tremendous spread. So, Jeanne, what would you say are some of the blue chip NFTs that you think are just going to, or the artists who you think are really the paragons that you think are going to hold their value?
Oh, that's a great question. I have a recent sort of trend that I'm in favor of that I think might be an interesting one to answer that with, which is I think there's going to be a reawakening and a reappreciation of some of the original computer and algorithmic artists that have actually been creating digital art for quite a long time, but until now really weren't getting any sort of attention. Part of what we've been doing at Danvas is we've been celebrating some of those early stage artists. They won't surprise you, their names, I'm sure, but, I think about Vera Molnar, who was, creating the very first pixelated digital art in the 1960s and has really, I think, proven to be an incredible visionary on so many levels, and yet hasn't been flipped 5,000 times, and probably is worth revisiting as a OG in the space. And the collecting around those sorts of artists, I think is beginning to get a little bit more interesting. And I think people are reawakening to those computer and algorithmic artists in a new way. And I like to see that, because I do think in what's lost in the story of NFTs right now is the PFP projects, right? And what's lost in the story is sort of a very specific way of thinking about value creation and flipping. But there has been a rich and deep history of the art movement for quite a long time. And I think with a little bit of illumination of that, we can, I think, expect to see those folks and their artwork get valued, insured, and purchased in ways that I think, for me personally, I find really inspiring. And then, of course, there's the folks today that are creating work that everyone has recognized as seminal or important. I mean, you have a PAC. PAC is clearly one of the ones that you would put into that category as blue chip. And I think also, as we look forward, the way that we are describing it right now, right, we've been reductive, right? We've said digital art, we've said crypto art, we've said NFT art, but underneath that, there are genres that people really haven't, I think, dug into and started to explore. There's, as I mentioned earlier, there's algorithmic art, right? And now increasingly there's AI art. And I think as people start to grow their intelligence around the different types of art out there, I think we're going to see a lot of collections develop that are really interested, or the collectors are interested in and passionate about supporting those artists.
I think that's such an interesting point, because if this digital art, crypto art world behaved like the traditional art world, the originators of this medium and the real innovators would be the most valuable.
Absolutely, they would.
They'd be like the Monets, but instead they're kind of in the status of performance artists, conceptual artists, like performance artists pre Marina Abramovich's MoMA show, which kind of opened up a doorway to making those things more shelf stable. But yeah, I think that's a really interesting question, is when are they going to get linked up? How interested are they in getting linked up? Is Jody just like actively finding ways to put their NFTs online? Pablo, what do you think?
This is a very dangerous question. So I want to be mindful of what I say, but I think it's very clear that talent alone is not enough. There's a lot of talented people in the world, and it takes a lot more than that to just to have a successful career. I think that it takes a lot of discipline. It takes mastery of your tools. It takes a thought about where your career has been and where is it going. I don't think that artists need roadmaps, but they do need a vision. They do need a place where they want to get to. That's very important. So with that, I think a clear reflection of the artists that I think are going to sustain and lead this ecosystem. It's through my collection. I have a soft spot for artists like Andrea Reisinger, who I think are absolutely genius in every way. Of course, as you mentioned, I've been Pac and his largest collector for a very long time. I think Pac is extraordinarily sophisticated and profound. I think people like Beeple, Refika Nadol, Davide Guayola, which is an interesting artist that was working with digital art before this big boom and really has a ton of experience. He's one of my favorite artists in the space. Just so many out there. It's impossible to choose.
And Caroline, I mean, going back to the idea of these OOG, digital artists, do you have any that you value in your NFT pool, or like what's the oldest NFT that you've appraised?
I think it's going to be Kevin McCoy. Well,
Okay, so
fun.
yeah, the originator.
Yeah. And then just adding on to what these guys are saying about the different movements, I'm really excited about generative art on the digitally native side, particularly artists like Tyler Hobbs, because it does reflect, while he's using algorithms and computer as the medium. I mean, it reflects on so many things throughout art history and strings together so many movements of the past in a really interesting way. And I also think that on the traditional artist side, artists that are able to take the NFT technology as a medium and translate their practice into that medium rather than just doing an NFT that shows their traditional practice, do something that completely transforms and is only possible through the technology. And I think that one of the greatest examples of that is Tom Sachs and his Rocket Factory, because that can only exist in that medium.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think that a lot of the more famous artists that you've seen kind of trying to get involved in the NFT space. Not going to name any of the names because I think we all know the most famous artists, but that kind of, I think, is very parallel to the Lindsay Lohans of the world, kind of entering the NFT space as a convenient source of income.
Would you call that a currency?
I would.
Okay.
I would
All right,
call
just
it
checking.
potentially a currency.
But there's been some interesting inclusions of, let's say, more traditional artists into the space. There's a recent one this week of Frank that I think is very exciting. You might like or not like, but the inclusion of both Urs Fischer and Daniel Ashram, I think, have been very successful uses of the medium. But I wanted to, just because when you said generative, I think there's two women that are really doing extraordinary work that are perhaps not as known as other artists there, and I think they have even a brighter future. Sofia Crespo and Anna Riedler, two magnificent artists that I think are going to, have a beautiful, beautiful career.
Can you say their names one more time?
Sofia Crespo and Anna Riedler. Both of them, I really, really. There's many more that I like, but those two just came to mind.
I'd plus one those.
Plus one, okay.
Plus one on those.
I'm going to look them up. But so let's talk about what's exciting you about the field. And I think, Caroline, when we were speaking in advance of this panel, you mentioned that utility was something that really got you all jazzed up.
Yeah, it's the functionality of it. It's it's while art is one thing in NFTs, which is incredible, obviously, to be able to use the technology. And also, one thing we talked about in our previous call was community through utility. And that's a really important aspect of NFTs, is people connecting through this. And, airdrops or NFTs that are invitations or memberships, it brings people together. And so I think that's one of the most exciting things going forward.
And obviously you love utility.
Yeah, I love utility. We have invented a display that in real life is a utility, allows you to enjoy your art in real life. I was just thinking about what you said. I mean, arguably, we could have all used an NFT to get into this Armory show. We had a digital pass, could have been tokenized, could have been in our wallet. It's already happening. I thought of that earlier when you mentioned that NFT is a misused term, because it really is. It can be applied to any industry. I think from a utility standpoint, again, because Danvas is such a direct physical reflection of utility, I get excited about the idea of people being able to enjoy artwork in a way that not only excites them in a physical space in their home, but also the NFT utilities around collecting can get interesting too. Once you own an NFT that is associated with a piece of art, now that artist has a way of communicating with you in a quite a different way, right? Now you've invested in that artist. They know who owns art that's associated with their tokens. It can give you permission to come to their shows. It can give you permission to come to see them in their own studios. It gives you access perhaps to early future drops of their artwork. And I think as a collector, there's a whole new way of thinking about participating as a supporter of an artist through the utility of an NFT.
Kind of makes you a producer, in a sense.
Yes, I don't know. I like to think about it as a supporter, right? Because the artist is the person who should be controlling where their IP, their creation, and their artwork goes. Producer seems like a strong word, but an investor and a supporter a patron. Let's use an old term that way.
And it also reminds me a lot of what, the idea for Kickstarter was.
Yeah.
That it's really about this reward-based, community-based idea of being involved with the art. And Pablo, how is what you're doing intersecting with this idea of utility? And what is it about utility that you think is really pointing the way into the future?
I'm sorry, I don't want to have a different voice, but I personally, as I do my collecting and what we're doing with Aorist, while I think that utility is fantastic for certain applications, and even in art, utility can certainly be provided, I don't need utility for art. For me, art has its own thing, and I personally don't need utility. I can certainly acquire a work of art without thinking of the utility. Now, this can come in very handy with many things that we do around. I just want to be mindful that there's a fine line between trying to give utility and trying to get everybody be financial or blockchain sophisticated, and I'm not sure whether that plays good or bad for the development of digital art as a whole.
What would be the word that you would use to describe the thing that you think is most exciting about the future trajectory of NFTs?
Of NFTs or digital art?
Let's say, I think digital art on the blockchain.
I really cannot come up with that word right now. I'll leave it for the end of the talk if you want. I'll think about it in the meantime.
From our previous conversation, I would think accessibility.
Accessibility. Well, yes. It's a mistake to think that everybody is suddenly going to become blockchain or financially sophisticated. It's just not. People just also shouldn't do it. I don't see a reason why they have to. The same way that I don't know how to code. I don't know how to do certain things. It's just it's not something that I think is relevant for people to know. So I really, really do think that we need to make huge efforts to make this as accessible and easy for everybody to participate as it can be. It should be point and click like everything that we used to. We should be able to send, as we send an iMessage right now, to be able to participate and engage with this.
So I'm sure that there are a lot of really exciting questions in the audience, and I want to get to them. But I have two more questions for our panel, and one is very banal. It's, what are you working on next? What's next after your canvas?
Well, we've just debuted this week here, so asking me what's next is a bit of a tricky question because I have so much of this ahead of us. But I think what excites us from a Danvas standpoint, and these have been mentioned a little bit, is we have a physical display, but what's less maybe clear from just looking at it on the wall that's right across from here is that underneath all of the beauty of it, there's actually a GPU on board. And that GPU allows us to enable artists to create generative works, and it allows artists to get into new territories of art that have not yet been explored. So facilitating that and innovating around that is definitely top of our roadmap right now, in addition to getting all of them sold and into homes.
And you also mentioned that a future step might involve something that is less, on the wall and more of a metaverse kind of
That's
expression.
true. I mean, it's great. This talk is actually supposed to be a bit about the metaverse, so probably it's good to mention that. I do think that if you look at where the metaverse is going right now, the idea that you can have visibility into the metaverse from your physical location is an interesting and intriguing idea for us. If you've been to galleries in Decentraland, if you've experienced what art looks like there, it's a bit of a one-way experience, right? You're within the metaverse, you're looking at a digital artwork. But what if you owned that digital artwork and you could see from the other side of the lens who's looking at it, right? And what if there's dimension to that experience? That's something that, as a larger brand, we think about and we want to be a part of as we move into the future.
And Pablo, you mentioned your random international project coming up in Miami. But what else are you doing in the metaverse? What's your next? I mean, I know that you're doing physical encounters, physical expressions, and activations of digital work. Talk a little bit about that.
Yes. So again, we are fully focused on. It's a very, very, very let's say, engaged in sophisticated projects, so we're fully focused on the presentation of Random International in Miami. However, a very important component of this, and again, I'm not sure how much I can share, but it will have a digital presence. It will be, let's say, in a metaverse component, the same interaction you're going to be able to witness it and experience it online in a digital form. This is likely going to be with Mona Gallery, which is a very exciting project that is bringing together artistic environments to showcase digital works, and they're doing things extraordinarily sophisticated and very well.
And Caroline, what about you?
A few things. So first, we have an app that's going to be launched in hopefully a week. It's in its 4th version of edits. You'll be able to request and receive appraisal reports directly without ever having to interact with anybody. So it should be a very, very accessible and easy way for both fine art and digital assets to track your valuations. And then on top of that, we're building an block weave, which is essentially, it's the permaweb. So it's kind of, we're studying digital twins and looking at digital twins of entire collections. And then the valuation piece itself will actually be tagged in permaweb. So it's there forever. So you can call it in the future. And then what makes it permanent is that it's on an endowment model, so that you pay for the storage and the valuation once up front, and then the interest pays forever in the future. So pays for the service. And then the other thing would be an oracle that's coming specifically for collateralized loans that you'll be able to call on via chain link on several different blockchains.
So before we open it up to questions, you guys have such interesting, different ways of approaching this topic. Do you have any questions for each other? Do you have like one question for each other? Any questions?
I have a question.
Shoot.
Kind of a place to both of you guys, actually. So with the display of NFTs, like I love the screens. They're so well done. And
Thank you.
what do you guys see going forward? And as someone who lives with a lot of NFTs, holograms of NFTs, or what's next in terms of how to live with them in addition to screens? Have anything on the horizon?
I have seen some good iterations of holographic art. I think, if you were in Basel at the One Digital event that was there was a really beautiful iteration of a holographic piece. And there is an element of it that's quite sculptural, and I can see a way for you to bring that into your home that would be really interesting and really moving. So we do think about that. I don't know how...
No, so the first thing that I would say is that what she's doing is incredibly important. This is the first step and the most important step, because we really need to go away from showing this in your phone or in your, in your computer to actually showing it properly in the physical world. I also personally think that the metaverse generally is a fantastic idea, but there's still a lot of development that needs to happen on that side for it to be an experience that you want to do on a Friday night. Now, having said that, I do think that this is one step. I do think that there's many other valid ways of tying digital works to physical manifestations of that work, and in our case, again, this is the most important one. I cannot wait to purchase a few.
I'm going to walk you right over.
Yes, and we're going to have a few at home. But the reality is that we also have some projections. We do have some holographic stuff. We do have some actual physical prints related to the works. We have some sculptures related to that are part of the digital works, and just different ways of manifestation of that connection. And I think it's an exciting thing. The first step, and a lot to follow up with.
Okay, well, I guess it's time to turn this over to. Okay, Rainer, go ahead.
Damned, a microphone. Well, my name is Rainer Canal, and I'm very happy to be here. I study with Naam Chum Pike and Vivian Westwood and the early people in France and here, and obviously all the fancy people from New York City. That I just, basically a lot of people. But what I find so interesting here, and I have been going to art fairs for many, many years, photographing them, but all I have seen is a certain inflation of terminology, because in the end, it's pretty much the same. I learned that from, I'm a painter. I would like to even invite you to a show that is physically going on, like physically. You can even write your name in a book. ATM Gallery, the curator is even here. It's 269 Bleecker Street, ATP Gallery it's called, which is a very small gallery, but I know you want to stop me already, but what I have learned in this kind of 40 years of art making is it's always the same equation. Those who have money, those who can write, those who can do things, and those who cannot. And usually, as a good Marxist, since you bring up meta, I'm suing a meta guy currently here. So I am in Supreme Court for $1 billion for a guy who's a chef, executive and engineer for Meta. Facebook Meta, he made $1 billion being absorbed by Meta, and I'm currently suing him in Supreme Court. I sued him for $1 billion.
Rainer, I think
anyway,
we'd
nice
like to
keep
this going with questions rather than comments. Is there anybody who has a question for the panelists on stage? Oh, here. Microphone is coming.
I don't know Rainer, but as far as I can tell, the one comment would be like, "There's nothing new under the sun," right? So that's my response to him. But I had a different question. I wanted to shop an idea with you guys. So I used to be an artist. I used to be a photographer. I didn't go all the way like Rainer did, but I tried. And then I didn't make any money, so I became a machine learning engineer. I'd already studied that, and now I build models. And I don't think I would be amazing at this, but I wonder if you think there would be a market for an idea where I could build a language model, pretty much something like how Google did, and they thought it became sapient, which it didn't. I don't think it thinks, but something of that sort. How would you sell it? How would you insurance it? How would you appraise it? And is there like a market you see for machine learning art? And Rafik Anadol, I know him. I know about. I think behind his work is like those convolutional neural networks and image recognition. But I wonder if there's a way to even display text-based art and art that deals with language models, not just images, because I don't think I'm too good at creating those.
I think what this fits very much into the description of NFTs as sort of an inadequate term. If you're running a language model, it's absolutely something that you can apply a token to and put onto the blockchain. And there's a beauty in that, because if you're the innovator and you're the inventor of that language model, now you can have publicly that recorded. The way that you choose to express that language model is its own artistry, right? So if you decide that you want to make a physical representation of that language model, I don't know how it would manifest. Maybe it's the actual text that it generates. Maybe it's the code underneath. Maybe whatever the creative vision is that you have for your language model, that in and of itself is, in my mind at least, a very viable and interesting form of art. So I would say, I would encourage you to think about it that way. You can apply a token to nearly anything and make sure that someone sees it for whatever kind of expression that you want. Just thinking about forms and visions of different kinds of artistry and NFTs, there are some artists out there, there are choreographers out there who are creating beautiful dance moves and for the first time recording it, applying an NFT and putting it on the blockchain, because for such a long time, that was an expression of art that absolutely was copied without any respect, without any sort of authority, credit to the art themselves. And I think if you expand your vision of what an NFT can bring, you can absolutely protect it and express it.
Would you mind if I interjected just once more?
Oh, it's his moderation.
I know. I
think
think become the moderator.
I think let's just give other people a chance to talk. Oh, go ahead.
Amy Whitaker. Thanks for the wonderful panel. Pablo, so nice to meet you in person after your brilliant remarks on the NFT event at MCA Denver. It's wonderful to hear from all of you and to know some of you. I wanted to pick up on the theme of resale royalties that Pablo mentioned in passing, and I think everyone has kind of mentioned. You said that there were other ways that you wanted to see those in practice, and I'm curious about the details. And just to expand that question a little bit, Caroline, how does that come up for you in valuation, and how does that extend to other things like commercial rights, where there's either a lien on an object or an extra source of operating revenue going forward? And Jeanne, this may come up in your work with Danvas as well, but resale royalties, et cetera. Thank you.
I mean, I'm happy to give a little bit of my thoughts. The reality is that I haven't gone through I haven't written a paper around what I would do exactly with the royalties. I do think, though, that first, the good things. The good things about royalties is that they're really bringing and turning the table closer to the artist than to the service providers, as it's more so in the traditional world. Having said that, I do think that, again, they do not serve for the correct maturity of their market for two reasons. One of them, it incentivizes, even though it's not very clear, but you can see it now through the 3 years that we've been really going at this. It really incentivizes oversupply. And while I never want to tell an artist to not produce, I do think that supply is an important component of a market, and it needs to be managed if you want to sustain any sort of pricing. We can talk about the details of why that leads to oversupply, but I think it is pretty clear. Artists don't really care if their prices go down a little bit, as long as they're getting royalties, they're still getting paid and paid and paid and paid. The second problem that I see is that royalties are paid no matter the sale price. So you might buy something for, let's say, $1,000. You sell it tomorrow for $500 and you still pay royalties. I'm like, well, what happens? This does not incentivize the artists to actually work with their collectors and with their audience to actually try to make their works more valuable. So again, as a concept, I think it's fantastic, and the technology allows for this to happen. But I personally would like to see a little bit more dynamic royalties moving forward, where there's certain parameters. Now, there's a very important third part of it that people don't realize. If you really want to be fully decentralized and utilize the blockchain as you should, and this is a tool, you cannot control the enforcement of royalties. And trust me, there's going to be a lot of people, all the people that are looking at this as financial assets are going to do everything that they can, and there's always going to be around ways to not pay royalties. If you want, as an artist, if you want to be receiving royalties, the best, and in my opinion, only way, is to really foster a close relationship with the collectors, to really pick your collectors that are going to be more than happy to go be alongside your career and pay that royalty when the royalty is due, when something happens. But I think it has to be a comprehensive effort from all sides.
And I would add, make sure that your smart contract is well written.
That's what I was going to ask. That I think that the conventional wisdom is that the smart contract eliminates the loopholes that allow a collector, but you're saying no. Can you explain?
There's absolutely. I mean, you can have a highly sophisticated smart contract. The only way to enforce royalties is to stop transfers to other places, and then it's not an NFT, it's not a token, it's not. It has many things. Trust me. If I want to sell something with no royalties, I can 100% do it. I can even create a smart contract on top of that doesn't pay the royalties. It's just, and these are going to be fully available to anybody, like downloading a computer program in the future of your wish. So again, we're going to have to bring the right incentives into play if we want to respect this long term. Another, I'm not sure whether this is something that would apply, but I don't think it's out of the question, the analysis of actual collector royalties. I know that this sounds a little bit out there, but there's a lot of work that is done by certain collectors, certain type of collectors, that I think if they were incentivized, they will really give rise to a much more mature market. Now, I haven't tested this. I haven't written a paper on this. I haven't really gone to depths about the thinking, but it's just a question that has been lingering in my mind for some time that I would like to see some experiment and application of this at some point.
From my perspective, it's a little simple, I guess. I only see it really having an issue on appraisals for collateral loan, because of course it would, if you're looking at marketable cash value of what the the lender would retain, then your LTV is affected. Insurance, you're not trading something, that's you're holding and insuring, so I wouldn't see it affecting that. So really just with collateral loan.
Very interesting question and very interesting answers.
Hello. The talk was supposed to be on metaverse technology, but we didn't talk anything about metaverse technology because you have Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, but then it's impossible. And I don't know who really understands how it all works, but if you don't talk about Web 1, Web 2, Web 3, and then we're moving into Web 3, into metaverse technology, because NFTs are just a byproduct of that, such as smart devices and all the other things in crypto. So I would like to hear your stance on metaverse technology, just for the people that, because I know the people that I know that are here that understand what you guys are talking about, but I'm concerned about people that don't understand NFTs, but you can't understand NFTs if you don't understand metaverse technology, which that's what I was interested in hearing about, your stance on metaverse.
I was going to add to his question. If you were talking to your 87-year-old grandmother, how would you describe the metaverse?
SimCity?
Well, I think what I would go to, honestly, and maybe this is why you framed the question the way that you did, is I would not be able to do it without explaining Web 1, Web 2, and Web 3 first. That's just sort of narratively, like, I think would be what would make sense to me. I think, and if is anyone's 87-year-old grandmother here that would benefit from this? I'm going to pretend you're my grandmother now, then, and I'm going to give it a go. No, not that grandmother. Different grandmother. So I think, like, Web 1, and I think that's probably the place to start, is the familiar web. It's the web that we all learned about in 1997, and we really largely, it was ruled by e-commerce, by news, by publications. Thank you. You're probably, actually, if you ask the academics, they'll even say probably before that. But in commercial terms, we were all introduced to Web 1 through the lens of e-commerce and news and a little bit of messaging. Web 2 was the onset of social, right? So we've got all of our data now in social sites and in social dynamics. And in a lot of ways, we've learned some things about what happens when your data is in the Web 2 world, right? Now, ownership of your data is not necessarily yours. Facebook has a lot of my data. I'm not sure I'm totally comfortable with that. Instagram has a lot of my data. A lot of these companies that have my data now are using that data to monetize. Web 3, in many ways, was a reflection of the nervousness and anxiety of that. So Web 3 was a turn to putting that data into a public web that was put on the blockchain, where no company, no government could own it, right? Where it is literally publicly held in the Web 3 space. That's sort of how I would try to explain it to my very savvy grandmother. In that light, where blockchain becomes interesting is that blockchain allows builds of new lands and new territories because it's just the freedom to build creatively and to post to the blockchain. You're not inhibited by corporate structure. You're not inhibited by government structure. And a lot of artists have decided that they want to build galleries into that world. And that world has become this alternate metaverse. I'm just speaking in terms of art right now. And you can have a metaverse that houses an entire alternate life that you live in too. But from an art perspective, people built ground up galleries in ground up worlds, right? When I say ground up, I mean they literally built them brick by brick. And in moving around those worlds, you get to go into beautiful art spaces and see beautiful digital art. If you're a grandma and you understood that, you can raise your hand and I'll feel better. Thank you.
I like to reduce it to two components.
Ooh, even more reduction. I like it.
I like to reduce it to just two components. And again, as you said, there's a lot of terminology in the space with everything, and nothing is really fully defined yet. But for me, metaverse is digital ownership and user-generated content. I think that's something very different to what we used to see before, where it was mostly a producer, pushing the content and people experiencing it. I think that there's something fundamental here that is changing, which is that we can now certify full ownership, immutable ownership of that digital asset. In particular, consider it a game, Fortnite Sims, where you can actually purchase the land, and nobody can do anything to take that land away from you. That's yours, and you can do whatever you want to do with that land that is within the bounds of that particular project in the metaverse.
And I
just
just
to-
want to mention in terms of the panel's art in the age of the metaverse, not art in the metaverse, which is a very different thing. Because, and I think Pablo, for you started on Decentraland and in the traditional kind of conception of the metaverse as a digital space. But what you're doing now is actually bringing digital art into the physical space, with a tie to your digital platform through things like this Random International. And that, I think, is a very interesting way of looking at art in the age of the metaverse, because it's not all on the metaverse, and a lot of it is digital art that is on the blockchain, but it's a much more vibrant five-dimensional context.
I shouldn't even be saying this because it goes against many of the interest. I'm still a huge supporter and one of the largest owners of land in the different metaverse in the whole world. But the reality is that there's a slight issue. And again, I love my peers that have been, the innovation has been pushed through here. It's something that I've never seen anywhere else, and I really don't want to discount it from them. But in order to make this promise immutable and this ownership real, they have to connect to the blockchain, and that requires some hindering in the experience that, in my opinion, is really lacking them right now. The reality is that outside of Mona, right now, there's very few, let's say, art-focused digital spaces that are sophisticated enough where you want to go many, many times over and host events. We're going to get there 100%. We're on the right path. But right now, perhaps the infrastructure is not at the level of the pace of innovation.
I think that is, I'm getting, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for coming.